Welcome, one and all, to our March program. It's good to be with you all this evening. I want to begin with a couple of announcements. First and foremost, you may have seen in the email reminder for this program, if you got it, that the Boulder Lake Environmental Learning Center has a couple of opportunities that they're looking for some people to be a part of. First of all, they're hoping to do some owl surveying March, April, and May. This is something, I guess, that in the past Duluth Audubon helped out with there, and they're looking to revive that. And so, from everything I've been told, you would receive some instructions about how to conduct the survey according to certain parameters. And if you're interested in that, you can email the address that was sent in that email message to you, or just let me know, and I can pass your name along to the folks at Boulder Lake. Also, in the past, there's been a Boulder Lake Big Day, usually that second weekend of May, and that is planning on happening this year again on Saturday, May 11th, I believe it is, 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. We gather together at the Environmental Learning Center. We break off into different groups with leaders, and the leaders take you kind of all over the campus and some of the wider area just to see as many birds as possible. Sometimes in the past, I think they've made it a little competitive, and there's been prizes and things like that. I don't know what they have in store for that. But if you are interested in being a leader of a group, that is something that we need to know, because they will figure out how many people to have register for the event based on how many leaders there are. So I encourage you all to participate, but if you think you might be okay with hanging out with a small group of people looking for birds and helping to point out some things, please let me know about that as well. And then lastly, as you may have seen in our newsletters, we keep putting the word out about re-upping your membership for 2024, and so please consider doing that. And if you have already, and you get the email I'm about to send out this week, just disregard it. Some people have paid multiple times for getting, so check your records before you send. We love the extra donations, but check your records to make sure that we don't run into any complications of double, triple, quadruple paying. All right. Any other announcements from you all about anything? Any observations of anything you've been seeing lately? Gregory?
I saw 10 trumpeter swans over 26th Avenue East, Underground Hill yesterday morning.
Flying over?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really nice to see.
Yeah, I saw two.
Down in the St. Louis River, so drive across the Oliver Bridge, and people said, oh, there are a few in the river to the south of the bridge. Well, I looked upriver, and there were about 60 of them. So I thought, awesome. So they're probably up around, like maybe around the Munger area or so, but that's been awesome.
These were going north.
Cool.
I counted 82 of them along the St. Louis, but this was done by the pumping station down there, that sewage station. And there were about 16 in Eloise Bay.
Very good.
Saw Robin last week in one place.
Yes, I did too.
There are a few here and there already. So.
And I finally saw that huge flock of Bohemian waxwings. Finally, I was looking and everybody else was seeing them, and there they were in my back alley. So,
Do folks think that they're amassing earlier than usual, or is it just my perception that they are earlier?
We had friends that came over from Ohio last weekend to bird Saxon. And so we got together with them for dinner, and they said they were looking for the waxwings, and I said, you need to come to Duluth.
Yeah.
They're hanging out. But then Tuesday night, we were doing Astro Bob King's astronomy class, and so we're up on Skyline Parkway near Hawk Ridge, and heard a woodcock. And I had heard one last week sometime when I was letting the dogs out, and I thought, is that a woodcock? I said, yeah, it's kind of early, but yeah.
Yeah.
So 2 or 3 other people.
Here we go.
Too. Yep. Spring. We still have a few red poles around, a few, and purple finches, a few coming. So.
And Rich Hogue says that Mama Owl, the Mama or Red Horned Owl down West Park is sitting on her nest now. And that's like the 5th or 6th year in a row that these two owls have had young, had brooded eggs down there and hatched young. That's quite a good pair.
and what did Sharon and Eric see? The goose, black fronted?
White fronted goose. Yep. Yeah, people have been seeing them here and there across the region. So.
Yeah, I went looking for them too, and
They move around.
Yeah. Then a girlfriend in Superior said she has mourning doves back too, so crazy.
It's happening. Anything else you've been seeing or hearing or noticing?
Breakfast yesterday.
Grackles yesterday. All right.
Yes, I've seen breakfast too, in our neighborhood. Yeah.
Very nice.
And goldfinch.
Yeah, I heard one yesterday.
A lot of eagles on the Hawk Ridge count.
Hmm. For those who might not know, the spring Hawk Ridge count is happening already in March 1st, I believe. And that takes place at Anger Park, or depending on the wind, at Thompson Hill. So, yeah. So raptors on the move. Anything else?
I saw a shrike today.
Cool. On your drive here?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, just during the work day.
Because that could have been an omen one way or the other, I don't know.
I thought it was interesting, I had to go down to Hinkley today and back, and you know, that little, pretty little lake east of Barnum, when you look down, as you go down the freeway there, that's free ice, it's ice-free already, so gee, things are opening up.
Well, very nice. Thank you for sharing. Today, we welcome Ryan Pennesi, our friend from up the shore, to join us to talk about camera trapping and visual storytelling. Thank you for coming all this way to be with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, Jeff, and also thanks to Sharon. She was missing this one, but I get to work with her, so that's true. Anyway, hi. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm a photographer. I live up in Finland, and one of my favorite techniques photographically is using camera traps. And so I'll kind of dive into some of the things that I've found and some of the stories behind that. This is a photo that I got recently, one of the first snows of the year, and found a spot where this beaver was hauling out and going to its cutting yard, and put a camera trap there, and I love how the hands have like little mittens dipped in the fresh snow, so that was kind of fun. So that one had to be the cover shot there. But yeah, just a little bit about me. You know, I've always been interested in being outdoors. I grew up in central Massachusetts, and I spent a lot of time by the water. Vernal pools were like my favorite place in the world. Was always catching frogs, and I think here I was doing some kind of trying to make a fishing pole with a berry. I'm not really sure, but yeah, I really like wildlife, and I would always be the kid at the ocean, you know, catching the crabs and showing all the other kids in the bucket and that kind of stuff. So I was pretty blessed to grow up and be able to explore in the White Pine Forests in my central Massachusetts home. When I started growing up as a young adult, I decided that I wanted to focus on biology and then in wildlife conservation and management. And I got involved in the Wildlife Society at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And we got to go on these cool field trips and learn how to like build survival shelters. And during the breaks in the summer, I started working at a small rescue center / family-owned zoo. It was called Animal Adventures, and it was really unique in that I got to like have a lot of hands-on experience with all these really neat animals. There I'm holding a coati, which is a relative of the North American raccoon, and they're really fun. They're super smart. They like to steal scents, so they would always like try to grab my deodorant. I'd like shoving their hand up my shirt, and like then they'd rub it all over their tail, or like try to grab my shampoo and rub it on their tail. So. But working at the zoo, I sort of realized, like, I think I'd rather work with wild animals. It kind of made me a little sad sometimes to be working with animals that, you know, are in captivity, even though zoos can have a place for sure. And I moved out here in 2013, and I worked at the Wolf Ridge Environmental Learning Center as a naturalist there for 2 years. And actually, I spoke to this group when I was really in the beginning of my trail camera experimentation and whatnot, so that's kind of fun to be back here and have more stories and whatnot. That was probably in like 2015 when I was there and talked to the group here. So yeah, the Superior National Forest is kind of my playground and my backyard and where a lot of the photography happens. I also specialize in, I don't just specialize in camera trapping, I like to do general nature photography, and I just try to, get people excited about the outdoors and try to encourage other people to pick up a camera and find those beautiful scenes and those beautiful places. So I really like chasing the aurora when it's out and when it's not too late at night. Tough. I have a shot list, so it's just kind of a plan of different shots that I imagine in my head that I'd want to try to get. And this one was a sea cave on Lake Superior, where I found it in a kayak, and I was like, okay, so I gotta wait until it freezes up, and it's solid, and I had to wait years before that happened. I think 2018 was when I was able to do that and crumped out on the ice and was testing it and had my life preserver and everything, and crawled in this cave and was able to get the moon rising over Lake Superior. I've also done a little bit of guiding. My friend Ben Olson, who I'll talk about in a minute, he was a guide up in Alaska, and he invited me to come help as his assistant. And so I've done 2 trips with him the last 2 summers for 10 days at a time, and we go into the backcountry at Katmai National Park, and we have clients, and we try to get them pretty cool encounters with grizzly bears in their natural habitat. So these are a couple of bears just on the coast, and when the tide goes out, they are all about clamming. And so they're digging up clams, and it's pretty neat to be in an area where they're wild, but they're also used to seeing a lot of tourists, a lot of people. So you don't have to worry too much about it. But of course, we're also doing it the safe way as well.
So can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
How do they find the clams, with their nose, or do they actually dig around?
They dig around. Yeah, they dig around and feel them. They can probably smell them too, I would imagine. But yeah, it's
How do they open them? With their teeth or their claws?
I think both. Yeah, I've seen them kind of pry them open and just kind of crunch them open too. But it's funny, we actually saw a pack of wolves kind of like hanging around them, and the wolves would harass them a little bit, and then of course the seagulls would follow them around too and be picking up the bits as they go. Eating the leftovers, yeah, and foxes as well. So the grizzlies really provided for a lot up there. And I was surprised that they eat a lot of sedges. Just like cows, they were just grazing on like sedges all day, and then they'd roll over and fall asleep for hours. So it was pretty interesting. Macro photography is something that I think is pretty cool. I don't do a lot of it, but I found this little jumping spider in my yard and thought he was looking pretty handsome on this daisy. So. All right, so camera trapping, kind of my specialty. When I say camera trap, I also mean remotely triggered camera or game camera. Those are kind of all synonymous. And the way that they work, most of the commercially available ones, they're pretty small. And I use them mostly for scouting, and to kind of find out what the use is of the area, what kind of species are hanging around. And in my day job, I also get to use them for some wildlife monitoring projects too. And so this all started a long time ago. There's a long history of camera trapping. This guy's name is George Shiras, and he's getting canoed around by his assistant there, and this picture was taken in 1893, and he's considered the father of camera trap photography, and he did a combination of camera traps and also like this jacklighting kind of setup in the canoe where he'd go around the shores at night, and when he saw an animal, it would be like a crazy flash of light, and obviously a film camera back then, and so he was able to get pictures like this. Maybe some issues here, let's see. In 1909. So it just kind of blew my mind that he was able to get an image like this over 100 years ago. So he was always improving his flash device, which consisted of 3 burning alcohol lamps and a rubber bulb that, when squeezed, sprayed flash powder into the flames, which proved itself a foreigner to the Molotov cocktail that he bumped it and ignited the canoe and his boots with a cloud of stifling smoke. But it's like an astronomical event. I mean, when the critters saw this crazy explosion, they'd go flying, and it made for some interesting airborne pictures. But a lot of his images really inspired inspired folks, and he was published in National Geographic, and a lot of his images ended up being kind of the impetus for some of the first preserves in the United States. So kind of neat. And along came Ed Caesar in the 60s, so you see things are kind of improving here. This is his camera trap, and he had actually like a stake that he would put in the ground, and the animal had to literally, trip on the wire for it to go. But he had a waterproof box, kind of like a suitcase, with cutouts for the lens and the flash to protect it. He had a handle on it so he could carry it into the wilderness, and a slight pull on the trigger would draw the contact points together, close the circuit through a 6-volt battery from an old Ford starter unit, and the solenoid extension would pull back a pivoting arm that would physically press the shutter release button on the camera, like a little robotic arm kind of thing. And he was able to achieve this image in the 1960s in some remote area in Alberta, the Alberta wilderness. So I just was totally blown away that someone captured that image that long ago of Canada lynx taking down the classic snowshoe hare. And so they literally, so I don't know where the trigger cord was, but they had to like physically trip it somehow. So kind of crazy. So this is one of the first trail cam images I ever got, and it was a job right out of school, and I was working as an environmental educator, and I had these students at a local elementary school, and there was one day that I was kind of like hanging around the school woods, and I found where all these coyote tracks converged and had taken down a deer. And so I was like, oh, I gotta put a trail cam on this. And so I did, and I got the coyotes coming back. I had a barred owl, I had a fisher, I had all sorts of critters, like making use of this deer and then spreading that back out into the woods, all those molecules kind of being recycled. And I thought that was so neat. And so I used that, I started using the camera with the kids at the school, and they just got a huge kick out of it, and it was a great learning tool. And I started to develop this love of tracking. And this fellow, Paul Resendez, says it well. He says tracking an animal is like opening a door to the life of that animal. It's an educational process, like learning how to read. Following the animal's trail may bring you closer to it physically, but more important, it brings you closer to it in perception. The longer you follow the animal, the deeper you enter into a perceptual relationship with its life. And I really feel that. It's kind of like meditative, and I just love tracking animals. And so I mentioned I worked at Wolf Ridge. I brought my trail camera, and I encouraged them to buy a few more, and I started using them in a lot of my classes. We had one called Animal Science, where the students kind of can make hypotheses and come up with questions, and one of the tools, and they're also pretty silly with it. They love, getting themselves on camera. So it's fun for them to think that like where they are is the same place that animals are too. And so we have a hypothesis. We found this burrow during the class. It's right behind this building. What do you think lives there? And so they come up with their questions, and there goes the naturalist. There goes all the kids on the way to class, and then 5 minutes later, there's a gray fox right on the same trail that the students were on. There's a red squirrel. There's a deer milestone there, chipmunk, and we got this badger, American badger, Finland, Minnesota. That kind of caught my eyebrows kind of raised a little bit. I had no idea badgers were up there. And over the next couple of years while I worked there, I got a few more at different places on campus. And then a couple of years later, I got one at Teddy Gooch State Park, and then at Cove Point Lodge. And so it's like, well, maybe things are changing a little bit. Because I talked to some of the locals there and hunted and fished and trapped their their whole life, and they'd never seen one of these. So kind of interesting. These cameras can kind of give us a glimpse as to what's going on, maybe with animals expanding their ranges. So when I go out, I track, and I look for a reason why the animal might come back, and I try to be intentional about where I set my traps. And so this is some of the sign that I was seeing for the next animal that I'm going to show you. Inner bark is chewed off of these little seedling trees. there's a 45-degree angle cut close to the ground, and then there's these classic hopping tracks. Those are the hind legs, front legs. And that's, of course, the snowshoe hare. So in the deep snow, these hares, they leave runs. They're almost like troughs in the snow, and if you find a spot where they intersect, you can be sure you're going to get some snowshoe hare pictures on your camera trap or your game camera. So this is a diagram kind of showing what you should think of when you're doing a setup. So one of the most common places to put a trail camera is on a trail, a game trail or a walking trail, and so the best way to set it up is actually at an angle, at like a 45-degree angle, because the way that these cameras work is you can kind of see it's like a cone. So it starts small and it fans out. That's the detection zone. And so if you have it perpendicular to the direction of travel of the animal, you're going to increase your chances of getting a lot of shots of just the butt, just the rear end of the animal, and not the entire critter in the frame. So just to think about that. So if you turn that angle 45 degrees, you're increasing the amount of time that that cone of detection has to actually trigger the camera. And some cameras are faster than others. They've all got different kind of specifications on trigger speed, so how fast between the time it detects and takes the picture. So that's something to think about. Also is the position of the sun. So the way that these work is they're detected by a combination of motion and heat, and so all of us are giving off energy in the form of heat, and so that's kind of how the cameras work. And it turns out when the sun moves throughout the day, it can also trigger the cameras. And so trying not to point them, west or east is good. If you try to point it towards north or south, then there's a better chance you're going to get false triggers, which is when like the sun or moving vegetation might trigger it. And so here's a picture I took with my drone. And it kind of shows you at a landscape level what I'm thinking about. A lot of times I look at imagery, aerial imagery, when I'm deciding where I want to put a camera. And so you can see that there's this river here, and you see how the forest narrows right there, and then right in the middle of it, you see that? That's a dam, beaver dam. Excellent crossing corridors for wildlife. And you can just see how it's kind of a funnel for anything that wants to cross that big expansive wetland complex there. The obvious choice is going to be to funnel it right to that dam and cross the dam. And so that's where I would put a camera. And so real quick, I just want to show you a video from that spot. So there's a beaver working on the dam. And this is just this last fall. There's a fisher. There's a wolf. There's a bobcat. No, this is over a period of about a month. There's a mink, coyote, and followed behind it another coyote that saw the camera and didn't like it. But he came back and then he made it across. There's two bobcats, maybe kittens. That's a good question. It seems like canines are really sensitive to it, and they got really good hearing, so it's possible that they heard it, or maybe they smelled it. I think in that case it probably saw it, because it was kind of raised up on a branch, but I can't know for sure. Yeah. So all those critters using that one spot. So yeah, that's where the camera was. So I mentioned my friend Ben. Ben Olson is a really talented nature photographer, and he's kind of been a mentor to me. I met him through a mutual friend at Wolf Ridge, and he showed me his photographs of wildlife, and I was like, that is incredible. And he heard about my trail camera work, and he thought that the tracking aspect was really cool. And so we became fast friends. This is one of his images that he placed in a big national competition. So that's pretty cool. So we were going out one morning, and we were gonna go try to take some pictures of wildlife, and we found this dead gray fox on the side of the road, and I was gonna keep driving, and he's like, no, pull over. I'd like to photograph that. And I was like, why do you want to photograph a dead fox? And he's like, well, I want to tell its story. There's a story to be told there. And it's vehicle collisions, kind of this coexistence dilemma. And so he had a fill flash, he got on his hands and knees, I got on his stomach, and he had his wide angle lens, and he had a flash, and he was exposing for the moody sky, and he waited until a car came with its headlights, and I thought that was pretty interesting. I was like, wow, telling a story with the image, I kind of like that. So that kind of stuck with me. And he also told me, you know, there are people that do trail camera stuff like you, but they have really nice cameras and take really a lot of better images. And so I was like, I can make better images? That sounds great. So he helped turn me on to camera trap photography, which is where you take a higher resolution camera like a DSLR camera, you put it in a waterproof box, you have the same kind of sensor that would trigger those little game cameras, but it triggers the shutter on the DSLR, and then also it has external flashes so that it can illuminate the scene at night. And so there's the sensor, and then there is the camera. And I did bring one of them here, so if you wanted to take a look at my homemade camera trap in person, you can check that out. And so one of the first critters I was really excited to get on camera had left really big tracks in the snow. And this is when I was at Wolf Ridge, and so I'd go tracking them, and I'd spend hours, you know, following these big tracks in the snow. And one time I came back, and the very first tracks that I had left, there were new tracks from the animal in my tracks. Wow, they're really taunting me now. But very large feet. They had that was their scat, so white fur. So one of their main prey has white fur. I could see where it positioned itself right behind this log, and it waited until the prey hopped by, and then it pounced. And so it was a family of lynx. And I found a spot where these lynx had been hunting, and I picked kind of an intersection, and I got lucky, and I got a picture. There's 3 of them in this frame, but it was actually a family of 5 lynx hanging out on Wilford Driveway. And there's the circle, so you can kind of see them a little bit better. But I was totally hooked on lynx. I was like, wow, these animals are so cool. One of 3 of our wild cats here. And I work for the Forest Service as my day job. As I mentioned, I work with Sharon, and I got my dream job. I went to school for wildlife, and finally, it took me 10 years, but I got a permanent wildlife job with the Forest Service, and so I'm a wildlife technician. And it means that I survey for critters and try to gain insights on their populations because we do a lot of forest management activities. And so these are 3 sets of lynx tracks right here. 1, 2, and 3. You can see where they stopped here and went to the bathroom. And you can see here where there's a worn hair trail that they were following right through there. And so one of the cool things that I get to do is I get to pick up cat poop. And we send the scat to a lab, the Rocky Mountain Laboratory in Colorado, and they can do some genetic work, because when the scat passes through the animal's intestines, it sheds cells, and they can find out genetic information, like which cats are related to which. And through my day job, you know, I've spent a number of years now kind of learning their habits and figuring them out and getting a glimpse into their world, and I've gotten kind of good at predicting where they might go, which has been a lot of trial and error. But one of the things that's a sure thing is if I find where they've cached something and they're going to come back and eat it later, like they've caught a hare, sometimes they don't always consume the whole thing, and they'll actually save it. It's kind of like an insurance policy. I've even seen where there's as many as like 3 hares cached in a small area. And so under that mound of snow, there is a bunny. And you know that they're going to come back for that. And so I was able to get this picture of the lynx returning for the hare, and it also was kind enough to leave some scat behind right there. So This is how we identify the individuals. It comes back as a unique identifier with numbers. So I know this is an adult male, and it showed up in our system starting in 2021 up through last year, and hopefully we got him again this year. We did this project again this winter, but it's been harder with the lack of snow. So we know that that animal is at least, well, it might be 4 years old. So that's kind of neat. And then this is an adult female, first in our database in 2019, and she has had 4 different litters of kittens. So that's pretty neat.
Well, how much do they weigh?
The 20 to 40 pounds. 40 pounds would be really big. Typically don't get that big, but you know, maybe in the mid-20s is probably somewhat average. They're similar to bobcats, really. Everybody thinks they're a lot bigger, but they're really about the same. They're just they have more hair. They're designed for, you know, deep snow, and so their paws are bigger. They got kind of that mane going on. And then this is 1410, another adult male that's been in our database from 2020 to 2023.
Were these all going to be found up around the Finland area or North area?
These are all in the Superior National Forest, yeah, and kind of, usually they don't show up very close to the shore. They're like 5 to 10 miles inland or more. You start picking up more and more of them. So this is a setup where I found a log that had a pile of scat, and there's my setup there. The sensor's on top. You see I made a little hood for the sensor to kind of keep the elements off there, and I was able to capture, and that's how I kind of keep it up. This image of a rough grouse doing its drumming display. And on the same log, there's a raccoon at night. So sometimes you get things you don't expect. I was going for the grouse, and then here comes the raccoon, you know, walking on the log. So that's kind of fun when it's unexpected too. So here's an aerial image showing, you know, another one of the things I think about is edges of habitats, and how would an animal go from one spot to another? You know, where are they bedding down? Where are they getting food? So here I'm thinking about moose. And there's kind of an older clear cut here, red pine thinning, and then there's a wetland, and there's a really nice trail going right from that thinning to this newer clear cut. There's a lot of young aspen vegetation coming up that the moose really like to browse on, and so I slapped my camera right there, and it was really neat because it was a pretty worn trail, and I took a ladder actually, and I wanted to get a top-down view, so I climbed the ladder. I strapped my camera trap way about 10 feet in the air, and I faced it down. I was able to get that picture of a big giant bull moose coming through the trail at night with some leaves stuck to his antlers. So I was pretty happy with that one. And then this image, I got a tip. One of my coworkers, her husband works, he's an architect and does, he builds houses and whatnot on the shore of Lake Superior, and he said, yeah, I think one of my contractors was going to the bathroom outside and he found something kind of weird. And it was this deer that had been, I don't know if it was killed or hit by a car or what, but it was very intentionally covered in debris. It was cached. And I thought, that's a cat behavior. And I was like, will you tell me where that is? And so I set up my camera trap. I was thinking maybe it's a mountain lion, because there's been sightings up here, and I know that they do that, but it turns out bobcats do that too. And so this was just a big bobcat returning to recover its cached meal of the deer, and it was a small deer, maybe a fawn from the last year. So bobcat could probably take down a small deer, but there's really no way for me to.
I noticed like the cats are looking directly into the camera. Are they reacting to the lights?
Yeah, it probably heard the shutter, and I can do it for you at the end. It's a little click, but a lot of times they kind of just, what's that? And then of course there's the flash as well. And I've had the question, you know, does that like bother animals? And I found like, well, some animals more than others. Like the canines, they if it happens once, they're never gonna come back. But the cats, they don't really care. They just keep coming back over and over and over. And I've had so many pictures of this bobcat. And you know, the food, it helps keep them there as well, obviously. But yeah, and I've put trail cameras to kind of monitor, you know, see how they react to the flash and stuff. and some animals, if they get flashed once, they still come right by the same area, they just walk behind it instead of in front of it. So, see, yeah.
About the difference in awareness and sensitivity of the canines versus the cats.
Yeah.
Is that a factor of what? Of intelligence?
I don't know if it's intelligence as much as maybe a history with people or hunting pressures. I'm not so sure about that. It might have something to do, maybe with hunting and
So
trapping.
cats are less likely to be shot at and more likely to be snared, so they're not as wary.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a good question though. I don't know why exactly they seem to care less. But I notice it again and again, especially with the wolves. Boom, they're gone. you get them on there once. So this was kind of a fun spot I found. It was kind of a natural cave, and I got hair coming in and out of it, and a raccoon, bobcat, and it's kind of neat because you can see the size difference between these animals. They're in the same exact spot. There's a black bear, come and check it out. And there's a mountain lion. So I did not expect a mountain lion. I was pretty excited to see that. So I got in touch with the DNR and told them about it. And yeah, since then there's been a lot of sightings, and I think part of it is because yes, that one ended up dead on the highway. But there's been a lot of these in the news. That was mine. Voyageurs National Park, yeah. So they're around for sure, and I think they've been around, but also there's a lot more trail cams out there. But it does make me wonder, I wonder if more are going to be seen in the future. Who knows? But the DNR keeps track of that. So the historical distribution of mountain lions, range from British Columbia, Canada, southern Chile, Argentina, coast to coast in North America, and now they're kind of restricted to the green area. But all those dots are confirmed verification of mountain lions. So are they kind of making their way back into some of these historical territories and ranges? It kind of seems like they might be. There was one individual that ended up coming from the Black Hills and was killed by a car in Pennsylvania, and they were able to do genetic work and find out where it originated from. So I thought that was a pretty spectacular movement.
So mountain lion and cougar is same thing?
Yep, same thing. Yep, puma, cougar, mountain lion.
Might it not be that they are moving east because there's more deer to the east than there was historically?
Yeah.
Historically, deer were not that common, but now they are.
Right, yeah, and I think they do follow where the deer are for sure. It's one of their main prey. This is a photo taken by Carlton Ward, and he's a conservation photographer. And I've really come to appreciate this term. So it's photography that empowers conservation. And a lot of his work with camera traps in the Everglades has shed light on how a lot of these animals are genetically restricted because of development and access to their travel corridors. And so he's done a lot to preserve some of those corridors through his images and work with big publishing media like National Geographic. This is another one with the Hollywood sign in the background. Steve Winter, National Geographic photographer. And this image generated a lot of momentum to try to do things like underpasses near these crazy highways on the edges of cities, because these cats are there and they're trying to survive, they're trying to coexist, and we can coexist. We don't have to be afraid of them. They've been here, so that was kind of a powerful one. This is elk herd camera trap shot by Joe Reese, another National Geographic fellow, and he's done a lot to kind of show, some of these artificial barriers can really impede some of these critical migration routes for different animals. But it highlights creative solutions like this wildlife crossing up in Canada, and I just think that those living bridges are so cool. I've seen some YouTube videos. You can go on there and just type in, wildlife crossing, and you'll see all the different critters that use, arguably a pretty creative way to get around the vehicle collision with wildlife problem.
Do you know anybody that's working at the border of Mexico? All the fencing put up?
I don't, but that is an interesting one, right, for sure, because that wall is certainly impeding a lot of wildlife movement. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And I know that they've done some in Minnesota with I think 35 going into the cities. There are a couple spots where they've done wildlife like culverts kind of thing to let the animals go under the road rather than over it. So this is a conservation photographer, Morgan Heim, definitely one that inspires me. And she says there are many roads left to travel, species to pay my respects. I don't expect the world to stop driving, but perhaps her images can be used to support funding for wildlife crossings, help reduce speed limits, or simply just people take notice. And so I thought this was a pretty striking image of a coyote in a bed of flowers, and I thought it was pretty cool. And I tried to create something like that with this moose skull that I found in a bed of marsh marigolds. Kind of, moose have this uncertain future, and there's kind of been some turmoil the last couple of decades, and we have an opportunity to try to maintain habitat and do things to improve things for moose, but at the same time, climate change is happening, and there's a lot of factors: brain worm, and parasites, winter tick, and predation, and everything else. So that's what I was trying to do there. What else do I do? So as a conservation photographer, part of it's like, what do you do with the images? It's not just taking the picture and letting it sit on a hard drive. It's trying to inspire people, try to get people to care about the outdoors. And so I talked to 4-H groups. This is just a screenshot from a webinar that I did, try to get young people to pick up a camera and ask questions and get out there. I did this program called Document Spring, which was with the Oldenburg House in 2019, and it was to get kids from local schools to pick up, camera and document phenology and to connect with nature and see the timing of nature's events. And as part of that, I went in person and we do these hikes and try to find signs of spring. And I did a photography tutorial on YouTube and whatnot too. I've been on podcasts to talk about camera trapping and how folks can get started in that. I've had galleries with little interpretive signage that talks about different conservation statuses for different critters in Minnesota. This is at the Tetagooch State Park lobby. I work with the conservation volunteer, and this is a cover shot, one of my favorite images of a cow moose bedded down in the frost, and she had two calves kind of near, so that was a fun one. I also got to work in New York for a time as a research assistant, and we were studying formerly extirpated martens, and we would trap them and put little ear tags on them. And one of the interesting things about my camera trap is that it's high enough resolution that you can actually zoom in and read the ear tag without having to capture the animal again. So creative ways to kind of reduce stress, but also still be learning about animals. Camera traps are great for that. You don't have to physically capture the animal. But the other thing is they were interested in the throat patches because they have uniquely identifying throat patches, these mustelids. And so you can get them to look up and expose that throat patch with a food reward. So we would hang some bait up and get them to look up. Then you can have a catalog of all these different individuals without having to mark them. But these they're pretty funny. So this one's hanging upside down. He's literally on top of the camera, hanging off of it. So talk about a critter that doesn't care about the camera trap. He's climbing all over it. So kind of fun. I've also worked with some local researchers to kind of try to help tell their story a little bit. There's a guy at the Natural Resource Research Institute named Michael Joyce. Great guy, doing some really cool work. He's studying bobcats and fishers and their overlap. There's been some evidence to suggest that bobcats are kind of expanding their range, and they've documented bobcats killing female fishers, and that could be impacting their population. And so he's just trying to get to the bottom of that, and in order to do that, he's studying their movements, and he has to capture them, put a GPS collar on them, that kind of thing. This is one of his technicians, Nate. He's doing telemetry to try to find a collared fisher. I also got to be involved in this pilot project when I worked at Carleton County, where he was putting up these nest boxes to encourage female fishers to have a safe place, safe cavity to give birth, because they're obligate cavity nesters. His thought was that there's a general lack of these large diameter trees on the landscape, and there had been a study in British Columbia where the fishers really used a lot of these boxes, so he was just trying to see, could this kind of be a Band-Aid fix? But it also points to some larger, management issues. Maybe we're not letting enough aspen get to the age where they're big enough for these cavities to occur. But we had some success. That's a male fisher, and his head is too big to fit in there, so he couldn't get in there because it's specifically designed the dimensions of the opening for the female, so she's able to go in and out of it. And this one used it as a rest box. I don't know that he got confirmed evidence of them using it to raise kits, but he did get them using it as a safe place to rest, so that's kind of the other thing that I've been involved with is the Midwest Peregrine Society, and so they banned peregrines. Again, were once extirpated because of DDT contamination in their eggs, the brig. I'm sure you're all familiar with that one. But one of the things that they do is they ban them, and year after year they identify individuals. And every once in a while you get one that's like really hard to get a picture of or see with binoculars, super flighty. So trail camera, this is an unbanded female, but then the next picture we did get the identification. So when the climber went down to ban the chicks, brought one of my trail cameras, I'm on the radio with him, press this button, no, not that button, good, just leave it, yeah. So we were able to get the identification on that male. Another thing that I think is a really exciting project is this offal watching. So when hunters kill a deer, there's a researcher named Ellen Candler, and she's doing this statewide thing where she recruits hunters as volunteers to see what is scavenging these gut piles that are left all over the woods. And so it's a citizen science project, and I contacted her and I was like, well, I could take some nice pictures for you and maybe help raise some awareness about the project. So we staged a gut pile out there. You can kind of see the tree stand in the background. You can see the trail camera setup. So I'm trying to tell the story like this is what it would look like if you're a citizen scientist and you bring your trail camera to your gut pile. We got some nice pictures of vultures checking it out. We had a picture of a raccoon coming in. And we had a nice picture of a fisher there too. So that's one thing I've been involved with. So this is a setup. Anything can happen with the trail camera, and it could look like I'm having a lot of success here, but I'd say like 95% of the time it goes horribly wrong or wrong. And so I had set this up for moose, and right away the moose came and just started ramming my camera. Just flung it on the ground. What I didn't realize was that was a rub tree. Like there was bark stripped off it, and I just was like, oh, it's a perfect tree right next to this trail. And so the moose comes and is like rubbing its antlers on it, and then and I have a trail camera obviously watching the bigger camera. He gives me a glance like, there you go, buddy. And then of course there's a cow coming right in front of where the camera would have been. And there's another one, and I show up and I'm like, oh God, what happened? If you can see my face there. So here, black bears are very curious. This is a black bear that back when I had wires attached to my flashes, he decided to use it as a chew toy. So he's pulling the flashes off the trees, he's laying on the ground, chewing on it. He's taking I have these like a hood around the camera to kind of keep some of the water and stuff. He's like ripping off the flaps. There's a dead deer in the background, so every once in a while, and this is when I was at Wolf Ridge, I found a roadkill and I drug it into the woods to kind of see what would feed on it, and the black bear showed up right away. And what was kind of interesting about that one was that this deer had been pregnant, and it went right for the fetus, like inside. It just like knew somehow that it was in there. And I don't know, it's kind of gross, but yeah, I mean, there's some interesting images. There's the camera on the ground looking up into the sky. So they have a different idea of what the composition should be. Yeah, and sometimes they get too close. They're really curious. There's some examples of the critters that were just too close to the lens. Or you deal with fog, condensation is the bane of my existence, especially like wetland, it makes half the lens fog up. So if any of you can figure out how to put some kind of heater in there, I'd love to talk with you. But yeah, and does anyone know what animal is behind there, you think? Bobcat. So you can kind of see some spots a little bit, but that would have been a really cool shot, and of course it's just covered in fog. This is another thing that can happen. It turned out kind of cool here. It's called ghosting, and that's when you're using a long exposure. The subject may only stay in one spot for like a moment or two, like the wolf here, not long enough to create a proper exposure, and when it moves out of the spot, the camera is continuing to trickle in light because it's longer exposure. And it will capture details of the backdrop, so the trees, within the area once occupied by where that wolf was. So hence the transparent or ghost-like looks. That's why it's called ghost. That can happen. Sometimes it causes a desirable effect. I thought here it was kind of cool. It's like the wolf is one with the forest kind of thing or something like that.
Looks like a good technique for sci-fi films.
Yeah, for sci-fi films, yep. And then here it was like, I didn't like it as much because it was like motion blur of the bobcat and the lighting was just such that it just didn't work out with that one. This is a fellow that I learned from to kind of get started with camera trapping. His name's Emmanuel Rondeau, and he does camera trapping all around the world. He works with different nonprofit organizations trying to spread awareness and raise money for conservation and whatnot. But he's got some really cool images and guides out there as well for how to get into this type of photography. Another thing I'll just touch on briefly a little bit, I try to be ethical with my photography. This image was one that was awarded for a big competition, and they ended up revoking it because someone was looking at it a little closer, and it's an anteater with some bioluminescent like termite mound, and it's a really cool photo. But they were looking at that anteater and they were like, that looks identical to this taxidermied anteater at that national park. And it turns out they had taken it from the park and placed it in the field. And that it's just kind of, it's a little deceitful. Maybe if he had said, this is a taxidermy animal, blah, 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 it would be a little bit different. But you try not to deceive the viewer. You tell them what's actually happening. And so these are some rules that I generally try to follow. So I photograph wild animals. If I'm photographing something in a zoo, I'll say that in the caption so that people don't get the wrong idea. I don't bait the cameras or lure them. It's truth in caption, really, is what it is. So it's just be upfront with how you're getting the image, what you're doing. So this is an image that I think is super cool. I really like this shot, and he was upfront with the fact that he was using mice on a platform to get this owl to come in. And arguably, he probably would have never gotten this shot without the mouse, but also got a lot of flack for that. Just food for thought, I wouldn't do that. Here's another one, kind of a local story. I'm not trying to shame anyone, and it's kind of a learning experience. Some of this technology happens faster than the ethics can be formed by the communities around it. And so drone photography is kind of one of those that can be a little touch and go. There was a fellow in Duluth that saw 3 cats moving across the ice with his drone, and in my opinion, maybe got a little too close. If you start seeing that the animals are changing their behavior to what you're doing photography-wise, that might be time to back off. And he did admit that. He didn't realize, quite that he was getting too close at first, but he did get a really cool shot of the family bobcat sitting on the log, checking out what is that buzzing beehive alien thing, checking this out. So just something to be aware of. I'm getting into drone photography, and one of the things I really like to do is to photograph moose with them from above. And so I'm really careful with that. If there's any indication that they're looking up, that they're changing their behavior, I get out of there right away. And I'm really far away. I can zoom in really far with the drone. So right now I'm at the max altitude, which is like 120 meters, and I'm zooming in with a 7x zoom in order to get that picture. And they had no idea that I was there. They were just going about their business. But it was kind of neat seeing the bulls kind of group up like that during the ride. And so yeah, that is all I've got. I can take some questions, hang out if you want to see the camera trap, but thanks so much for being here. Let me talk about camera trap because I love it.
Any questions?
I'm glad that worked out timing wise because I did not practice. Yeah.
So what do you do? I mean, you put a DSLR in a box.
Yeah.
Which probably worked out good because you could change lenses and stuff
Yep.
like that. What do you get for a good trap?
Well, it depends a lot on what camera body you're going to go with and so forth. So I have a Canon 7D2, I think that used probably that goes for like around $300 to $500. Then you got the sensor, which is a couple $100. Then you got the flashes, which add up to a couple $100. So pretty quickly you can be looking at $1,000 or more to get a decent type of camera trap like this. And the reason why I wanted to do it was because I wanted to be able to increase my audience. I wanted to be able to have these images blown up large on a screen and still keep the resolution, or you print them out large and have them at the Teddy Gooch lobby or have them in a magazine. So in order to do that, magazines really aren't paying for trail camera photos, and so that's why I decided to get into it. But yeah, if folks are interested in like getting into this kind of thing, I could help give you some recommendations for camera bodies that could work or stuff like that. If you have like an old camera body that you're not using anymore, it'd be great to throw it in a camera trap and throw it in your backyard or something like that. Of course, there is a risk. I've had one of these setups stolen in an area where it just blew my mind that somebody found it, because it was like I hiked across a river, I hiked up a mountain, and in retrospect, it was like, okay, well that was during deer season, and there are a lot more people going a lot more places that they would never go. So I don't put them out during deer season anymore. And I don't put them out unless I can physically attach them with a cable lock to a tree. And this setup was like one of those where there wasn't a tree nearby, and it was actually at that spot where the mountain lion was. Mm-hmm. And so I had already had cameras there for a couple of years. I felt pretty confident, and what do you know, the wrong person came across it and they took the whole thing, and I was out, some money. So it's a risk for sure. And I'd like to think most people, when they find something like that, they leave it, but it only needs to happen once.
Again, I'm curious about your luck with Keenan. You didn't have too many pictures of wolves or
No, hardly any.
But wolves hardly any.
Yeah.
Is it just that it's very hard to get them to come by?
It is, yeah. I've had a lot more luck with the game cameras because they're a lot quieter, right? They're a lot smaller. It's hard to camouflage this thing. I mean, oh yeah, they're very good at doing what they do and avoiding predators, and one of the predators is people. They've got a long history, as you know, around here. So yeah, they're very wary, and I have gotten them on the camera trap, but usually it's just a one-time thing. They remember, and they'll just go around it the next time.
Can they smell your scent on that? Do you do anything
Probably.
to cover your scent?
I don't do much to cover up my scent. I know that some people are, almost religious about it. They'll get scent cover up. They'll leave their clothes outside, and they'll put on a new pair of rubber boots each time. I don't do any of that. I just try to limit the amount of time that I'm there when I'm checking the camera. The more time you're there, it's like a marker on a piece of paper. The more time you're there, the more that ink is going to bleed out into the environment. And so if you can get in, check it, leave, you're leaving the minimal amount of scent. And then also altering the vegetation and stuff like that around it, I try to do the bare minimum. Like maybe I gotta cut some grass in front of it so that it doesn't constantly trigger the sensor. But other than that, I'm trying to leave it pretty much how I'm seeing it. So, yeah.
So I've got two questions. Is the setup any different when you do video? And then
yeah.
the second question is, where are you going next with your electronic and stuff?
That's a great question. I don't currently do much video or any video with these setups. So this setup is just photography. I'd like to get into that, but it's kind of a whole different game. For one, the lighting factor, I don't know how you'd do a lighting setup for videos at night. With that, it'd pretty much just be during the day. I have pretty much switched entirely from photos to video with trail cameras, just because I found that I like that more. I can really see a lot more of the behavior and whatnot, and the video has just come such a long way. I mean, you saw the example with the trail cam video that I had in that beaver dam. You can just really learn a lot. So.
What next?
What's next? Well, I would love to get some more shots of mountain lions on the shore. The tall order, it's very tough, but I've been keeping track of these verified sightings, and I've been, I think, closing in on a few spots. So we'll see. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ryan, for being with us and for sharing your passion and work with us.
Of course, happy to be here. Thank you all.
All right, our time is concluded. If you'll be helpful and return some of the chairs to be around these tables and toward the back, that would be good. Yeah, next month is going to be a Zoom program. So we're welcoming somebody who works for Disney in Florida in conservation, actually there. So kind of a unique thing. So we'll get the word out about that as soon as we're able to.
I did, yes.